Hello, this is the November 20th OpenZFS production user call. We have Andrew, Stu, Steve, Jan, and myself, Michael, and I'm pleased to report that the videos from the recent user and developer summit are online. There are 19 in total. They represent several hours of content, and they also represent nearly 2 days of work preparing them because the audio needed much attention, and the recordings of the full day sessions were obviously quite large and long. So far, Brian's talk about the release engineering has been the number one video at 37 views. That's been crawling up the last few hours within the last 4 hours. So check them out. They are linked here. They're linked on various social media platforms. And I would actually like to ask for help. So Deng
Stu's
Yu's,
link. Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I was gonna say Stu's video came up on my list. Obviously, I have seen it. I was there and all,
You were there, yes. He's got
but
18 views.
specifically that did show up on my YouTube page, and I
Oh,
noticed it.
well, he's famous. So one quick point, Deng Yu's presentation kindly received some attention on the subtitles by Matt. And then when I reformatted everything, I then updated the subtitles as best I could, hopefully getting the functions correct, etc. But then I realized in the discussion of nearly all of them, our friends at YouTube really don't know much about ZFS, such that if you were to say, oh, ZIL or slog, you might get some very strange phrases. So for what it's worth, I'm willing to download all those subtitles, but if someone's willing to help correct them, that would be great. It's a bit of a project. It's a bit boring and slow, but some of it I'm sure is fine and replaced because if the same kind of misinterpretation is made, then so be it. So there, I'll leave it at that. I'll hop in here.
I'll be happy to work through one of them.
One of them. Okay, well, pick one. And preferably not the
Just
like
throw
2 minute introduction from
just
Matt.
throw one at me and I'll work through it.
Would be okay. That's appreciated. It'd be great to have some help. Uh,
I'm not
mm,
gonna commit to more because I don't know about time and everything.
understood.
I should have some time this weekend to do, one or two, assuming that it's not
Okay.
too difficult to time is one thing, but I assume it's just modifying a text file. Is that what's
It
involved?
is. Yeah, it's
Okay.
a text file of timestamps, and maybe I can give a quick example. I'll just paste in the doc a quick example. It's pretty low tech, and I'd almost not worry too much about um the timestamps themselves, but just when the word is wrong, it's definitely wrong. Let
Uh,
me duplicate this. .txt. I'll have a sample in just a second
Like
here.
you're gonna just send it to us and then we fix it and then we send it back to you. How's that gonna work?
Yeah, that's basically it because I can update
Okay.
yep.
that. Updated. You have this text only. Auto new. Oh, here we go. I'll go with auto new captions, which is definitely awful. So let me do this. Make it a text file. Text. Boom. Open and um, right. Aim to build or some of the egregious ones. Okay, here is an example timestamp. So that should have been a like libuzfs or something, and it's not. And YouTube really didn't know what to make of it. So my browser is super slow. Courier. Let me go find the correct one. So yeah, thank you for any and all help there. If we just break up the problem, it should go pretty quick. And again, you'll find that it's a lot of the same ones. 46 and 259. So
So I have a
here's a perfect
special.
example. Interfaces. Just let me highlight this, and then I'd love to hear
Mhm.
your example. So yeah, if you're cool with a little help there, it's just like, wow, they just and he's not a native English speaker, so I'm actually in some ways pretty impressed how well YouTube did in certain parts. Go ahead, Stephen.
I'm definitely interested in the Rust async runtime one. Was that the one you're just talking about?
That's
Oh, I'm
exactly
sorry.
it. And that's where it was all these, Rust functions and things I'm no expert at.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry. Wait a minute. But Paul presented also something about Rust, right?
yeah, I believe so. Yes, maybe it was his hackathon project.
Is that in here? Oh, okay.
Uh, I'm closing this
Oh,
because
there
it's
it is.
using like half my browser, but
I
oh,
see. The
Paul's would have
hackathon
been during
project.
the hackathon. Yes, so you'll want to
Okay.
hop into that and to his section. I did not segment
Yeah,
those. I don't think there'd be any value because they're all kind of back to back related. But yes,
I got you.
all
So
these talk should go into that. Go ahead.
I would definitely be watching that hackathon one in detail. If you wanted to throw one at me, I could probably
Oh,
take
so
a
you're volunteering for that.
yeah, I can
That
I
is
can look at that one
appreciated.
before the weekend, and then I'll let you know if I can take a few more for the weekend.
Okay, cool. Welcome, Rod, lurking away. Rod, the videos of the conference are up. I'll put you down for hackathon. And while I keep ping-ponging between this link, here, I'll close it again and I'll drop it in chat for you, Rod, and whoever else has joined. Okay, so there's that. And so here is an example of what that looks like. And some of it, a tiny bit of it could be searching a place, but a lot of it's hand verification. Sometimes you have to verify against the video, but often it's kind of clear. For example, anyway, appreciate it. Thank you. So, for want of other topics, and again, thank you everyone for participating in that. It was 19 videos. It was a delight. It's several hours of content. I should add up see what totals do. We definitely talked channel programs, and there's a video up there. Jan, what do you have in mind for this topic?
I just wanted to describe how I worked around the API limitations that I need several operations for which there is no API function exposed. For some
Okay.
of them, probably with good reasons. So instead of giving up, I decided to run a read-only general program which emits the things it detected that have to change back as its return value, and then a shell script runs the functions to actually implement the necessary state changes. So basically, the planning step of inspecting the current pool state and comparing that against the intended pool state takes place in a channel program, which then emits just a list of commands to run. It should get you into the desired state unless there's a bug.
So yes, you brought that up, I believe, yesterday, and I was pleasantly surprised that you're thinking, okay, we can determine what's wrong and we know where we want to be. So when something is wrong, we kick off and literally echo out a script that will
Well,
correct things. If I'm not
wrong is
mistaken,
not
it was a
really
neat
the
approach.
correct term
Okay,
because it's not
go
wrong. It's just not
up
the detected
desired.
state is not the desired state. So how do we get into the desired state? It's not. It can be
It's
that the user
actually
just, for example, changed that this jail should run a different FreeBSD userland version. So from patch level 5 to 6, please.
mhm.
And now the origin mismatches, and you fix that up by destroying the old clone and cloning it new from the correct origin again. That's not
Okay.
a mistake. That's just now a possible upgrade path.
Okay. Cool. Have you seen that style of coding administration in other contexts, or is that just it occurred to you for this?
I don't remember it, but I think I've seen similar designs where you have basically compute the steps it takes and then run those takes. That's not a new concept,
Sure.
but I can't point at a good example where it's
Okay.
like this. But in this case, the slightly unusual thing is that the channel program basically is trusted to take over the control flow from that point forward, which is not
Right.
a security problem because you have to be root anyway
Yep.
to put it in, and it runs in the kernel. If you don't trust the kernel, you have bigger problems, and you
Mhm.
put that code in. So if you can't trust your own input to the kernel, then nobody can help you.
Cool. I will find your example from, I believe, yesterday. It was relatively straightforward, and I think we went with a hello world. Here we go. No. Anyway, yes, called by. So, okay, to use your example again.
Sure. And if we have no other urgent topics, I would just bring up the Lua script and the screen share.
Okay, so just one moment on that. Let me get the example in there because it's a clever workaround. I'll grant you that. I was like, well, we want to do this thing, but then hey, we use the program to get us as far as it can, and then hey, we kick out what happen to be functions. So as an example, that might confuse people, but I do like the thinking on this. I'm trying to scroll down. Do you want to talk about these others first or hop into that example?
The next one is just a consequence of that, because at some point, if you really want that power, you have to allow your automation to run destructive commands
Hmm.
like ZFS recursive destroys or the equivalent thereof on a pool which will destroy local snapshots
Hmm.
and destroy clones which have changes in them which are not supposed to be relevant. Like I have to create an empty directory to mount something on top of. And that's the only change. But if data sets are big enough, you don't want to just run a find on them to check that there are no or ZFS diff because that would be slow to verify that.
Hmm.
So you at some point, do you trust your automation enough to potentially wipe out lots and lots of state?
Interesting. No, very, very good point. And does your times arrow relate to that? That sounds like Ivan
Uh,
Boris's
the- for example,
blog from a long time ago.
um, the thing I noticed is, okay, if I want this all to work the way I want it to work, and still play nice with any of the existing CFS replication and backup tools I've found, they trust the name to identify a data set, right? And if they find that the backup destination already has the source name replicated into it, it will normally try to find the last common snapshot. And if there is no common snapshot, bookmark, whatever um, safety point to resume
Hmm.
the replication from, it will just fail. And depending on the tool, it may break all replication between the two systems, and
Hmm.
or it may just break that data set's replication because there is no way to receive that data set without making that name available first, which would mean either destroying or renaming the data set.
Yep, that's a Daniel topic right there. Welcome, Daniel. And Daniel, I've dropped you the
Mhm.
link to the videos from the summit.
Great. I'm so excited to watch them.
Cool. You even got a shout out, and I believe the first one.
Aw,
That
thanks.
said, uh, uh,
Shall I
just
take
to
the screen? Or
sure. Let me just recap, Daniel, where Jan is at. It's like he found some limitations in channel programs, but realized he could generate and execute a script to help arrive at the desired state. So it was a neat workaround, and it sounds like you've got a demo. So yes, I'll stop the share. Go ahead. Unless Daniel, you've got a topic you want to bring up?
Nope, love to see this demo.
Cool. Go for it, Jan.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Zoom is requesting things.
So can you see it now or not?
Yes, you're closing VLC.
Okay,
You
that's
were
okay.
clearly remixing videos, were you not?
No, I was
Oh.
just watching something. It downloaded talk. Okay, so why is it so annoying? So here, let me minimize that. So basically, the execution begins here at the end, where I just decode the arguments because you get an argument list, and then in my main function, I define a little helper which allows me to just push lists of arguments to the result. And then at the end of the function, I basically check, does the parent for all jails exist? Does a data set for the jail exist? And then do the intended mount points within that data set exist? And afterward, I make sure that for any data set I've just detected as existing, if they have an at empty snapshot. So then there's a bit of logic here, which I can do. I can, for example, check if the parent exists, and then I check, does it have the right mount point, which it should have. Otherwise, I just output this single, basically, function name as call this function, and that will just output a fatal error. Or I can say the parent exists, which is just fluff for human consumption, or it can attempt to create the parent dataset for all jails. And then per jail, I do something similar. My dataset looks a bit, layout is functional, but it looks ugly to humans because it is ugly, but it is what it has to be. So here it checks, does the dataset for the jail exist? Compares the mount point. Okay, has the jail the right mount point? Nice. The jail dataset itself should be unmountable so that it couldn't even be accidentally mounted directly. And if it exists, I'm happy to just log that. If not, I will attempt to call the function jail create by pushing it to the list of things to do. And then the same for all the file systems within the jail. And what is unusual for ZFS is that when I'm having to use UUIDs, the dataset names get long enough anyway, and keeping the parent-child relationship intact between basically sub-mount points gets quickly annoying and doesn't help really with readability, and may actually run out of maximum name length if I have a full UUID for each level, because I can't reuse names or name components, which could result in reused names. So basically, unless I rename the parent, I can't reuse a dataset name. So I just keep basically a flat list of UUID named datasets. I know that it's not human friendly. It's with automation that's unusable. So here I now check, does the jail have more than one level of datasets? If so, I bail out. Here I check if there are multiple UUID named datasets with the same mount point property. That's also not allowed, because which one would you mount in which order? I mean, you could have a tiebreaker here and then mount them on top of each other, but it's probably always a mistake. Otherwise, just say that it exists and we call out the mapping from mount point to data set. Now that I know all the mappings from mount points to data sets, I can check if any mount point is in the table but has a false value instead of a string. So if that is the case, then I know that this mount point is not claimed by any of the data sets I've found, and I've found all of them, which means it does not yet exist. So that it is kind of reproducible in the order it outputs things, I sort the table of missing mount points and output them. Then for the empty, it's a bit more complex. It's easy here to check, but in the later implementation in the shell script, I have to make sure that I don't create an add empty snapshot on a file system which contains anything. Because in theory, it's possible that I create a data set and then the script gets killed before it can snapshot the data set. And I want to make sure that it's idempotent and recovers from that state. And what's next? Yeah, next is just calling them in the right sequence and aborting on the first fatal error. Okay, so how does the script driving that look? It looks something like this. It will first find the UUID for the jail and then run this channel. Okay. This is a bit of a weird way to write a shell script with lots of groupings just for I/O redirection. But I set up my command line, which is for the channel program. I walk through this, and I'm reading the script from standard input out of the here doc. But I have two nested here docs. So one is the one which command expands this argument line, and the other one is the script to run. And in the later versions, this cat here is replaced with the actual script you've just seen. But if I put it in one file, there's no syntax highlighting. For the Lua, it's all just one shell string. So what happens here is first we check. It's a bit strange to check the status here, but the last command which ran is the command expansion running the channel program. So basically this checks if the channel program encountered a fatal error. If so, produce a bit of pretty output, but basically kill the script with an exit code greater than 0. Now I read in all the lines until I find the return value. Next, I read the remaining lines, and I've made sure that the lines are really one value per line and just a tab separated string. Tabs don't have to be escaped, so everything works out. And I just remove the single ticks at the ends and call it good. Now I split it up and trust the output from the kernel to be a valid function call. And so I just expand $add in double quotes as a command to run. And now all the commands I'm expecting to run are function calls previously defined. So for example, parent exist is just, okay, call the pretty printed output formatting. And that can then look something like this. Sorry, yeah. Oops. So if I just run it like this, it will tell me that, okay, I have to give it something. It wants the mount point for all jails. And now I have a created pool name. And now things like slash etc. And what else do I need? Maybe I want user local etc so that it's easy to snapshot that again. Then maybe var log is a good idea, and var cache pkg and var db pkg. So okay, if I run this, I now have okay, let me change the font size so that it fits on a single line. It's very, um, now it really fits. And now I get a bit of pretty output. But the important part is it ran. So, and if I don't have the permissions to do it, I will get something like this. Bam. It will mark up the error. Yeah, so that's the script right now.
So where is the UUID used? I see the JL123
In the
name,
really ugly dataset names.
data set
So if
names.
I,
Okay. Maybe list those.
yep, I'm about to.
Cool. Oh, uh,
So the jail is this UUID
oh,
infected.
with the mount point set. And okay,
Exactly, and I
yeah.
just set the
Whew.
mount points so that I don't have to create the intermediates, so that
Hmm.
by flattening the parent-child relationship in the mount points into a single list of data sets, it's a lot easier to automate. But of course, I'm losing all the convenience of having the data set relationship matching up with the mount point tree.
Yeah, how
But
do
in
I
this
politely
case, it's a
say I
massive
hate that, but
downside to have
I
that.
understand it. Yeah, I get it. Jeez.
Because otherwise I would have to create one UUID for each level in the mount point path,
Yeah, you're right.
so that I
No.
would have
Oh,
things which you can't even print on a 4K display until, at least not on a readable font size,
oh boy.
until you run out of, for example, device name length or
Yeah,
mount point name length. Like, oh yeah, your mount point has to fit within, I don't know, 88 characters historically. I don't know if it's still in 14, but in 12 at least that was an
really.
issue. In FreeBSD, that the device path for a mount point was shorter than even a Unix socket path. And then at some point you will fill up a 256 byte, and then you will fill up a 1 kilobyte path, and then you are out of luck.
Huh.
Yeah.
So this is, I mean, this is a good alternative to, I mean, I guess what are the solutions that we use before that? I guess symlinks or null mounts and, fiddling with all
Yeah.
that
The
stuff.
problem with null mounts is that you have uh, there's some less than optimal things with having to create a basically a nullFS vnode to wrap the underlying vnode, or to always go through the indirection. Um, because nullFS can hold onto the last reference to files which would otherwise be released, um, unless you mount it with I think, even undocumented no cache option. Yeah, the next thing is that, at least on FreeBSD, the other nice thing is that this approach works on all ZFS systems, so it's not FreeBSD specific. Um, Unlike
Yeah,
doing
I was gonna say
specific
there
things
there
with
are definitely
nullFS, and even nullFS doesn't help you with avoiding to reuse names on the data set. I mean, I could define a nullFS to just mount it on each of the UUID names somewhere and then nullFS mount them together. But why would I when I can store the mount point property directly in ZFS? That's just one more indirection without any advantage.
right. There are definitely a lot of yeah, there are a lot of benefits to doing it this way. I think the other way I've tried to do it is use change attributes on a symlink, but package installs always throw a ton of errors. when you do that.
Yeah, what you could do if you want to basically, this is for the thick jail, which you then derive thin jails from by
Right.
cloning. What you can do also is, but that only works once you have the file somewhere under your jail root. But you can use things like the CP flag L, I think, to instead of copying a file tree, you can have it copy directories and symlink files. That is possible with just the base system CP, but yeah, the result is not the same. And what I want is not what this creates, because what I want is to have an immutable jail by default, but I want the option to have persistent data and writable and feral configurations, so that basically I start out with my base FreeBSD releases /etc cloned, then I don't use that clone. Instead, I use it to pre-fill a temp FS, which is less than 2 megabytes in total per jail, because it's just a bunch of text files and a few other config files which aren't text, like key files or something. And now I just use the mount mount command to mount a temp FS and pre-fill it from the snapshot. And on every jail start, I apply modifications like adding users to that. And because, yes, it feels strange, but the big advantage is that the diff you want to apply to the configs in /etc or user local etc are far more stable than a snapshot of that. So you never have to deal with running etc update or merge master or something on the jails anymore, because you start with your with the release and patch level you want, or your custom FreeBSD build even, and then you apply some modifications to it, like adding users, copying in config files to paths which don't exist. Like, yes, there's a .sample, or you override it and take complete ownership of a specific file. And that's far more stable than trying to upgrade each individual rc.d script or something, or default configurations you had to change something in. Just, yeah,
So
either take full
you
ownership of a file or have something as simple as a diff against it, or some command you run like pw user add whatever.
so every new system is manually configured in an automatic way using PW and friends
Not manually configured, but
automatically.
completely automated.
Automate. Fine. Okay.
It runs a shell script or whatever you could run. If you
Sure.
want more structure and are willing to wait for the overhead, you can run Ansible pull
Right.
to a Git repository. You say this branch or this tag, Ansible pull this in. You just have to make sure that you already have Ansible and whatever version control system Git you use. And yeah,
Cool.
there's a little
And
more to write, but it's possible to, with this approach, to replace dozens of ZFS command invocations with one channel program. Because normally, without it, yes, you can filter which columns you get, but what I need is I have to filter, then do set operations, union intersection, or even left or right joins, and then maybe even sorting afterward. So because I can't express relational algebra in ZFS list or get, I need to run lots of ZFS list or get, especially when I have values which are not easy to pass through shell scripts without loss, which force me to, for every value I want of every data set, to run ZFS get to get just one value. That slows down the whole automation a lot. It's not that running the channel program is completely free, but yeah, we're talking about less than 100 milliseconds on a slow, low power system if it has to do the changes, and like 30 milliseconds if it doesn't, just off shell scripting overhead and running the channel program per jail. So I want to keep it so cheap that basically the inspect the jail ZFS state and patch it can stay within the normal jail startup path. So that basically there is no difference between in the configuration where provisioning and starting are the same command to execute, just jail-c jail name. And it should not introduce an annoying level of overhead to the startup time.
How are you keeping track of the desired configurations for a new jail that you auto?
Via jail.conf, I specify that.
Oh, got it. Okay, so that's
it's in
and
a
it just
jail
calls the
conf,
rest of it
no,
around it in a hurry.
and
That's pretty cool.
I want to keep it so that the jail command is the outermost tool. You should not have to deal with external things. So there should not be an outer jail manager required to automate that. Instead, it should be through the jail exec.whatever hooks.
Yeah. What about the
So that
creating a username with a given password? Where do you keep track of all of that? In the jail.conf or elsewhere?
it gets included in there.
Okay.
So
Bit of a jail topic, but it's
yeah,
fascinating.
it is, but that was your question, and
Yeah,
it
no,
is
amen. I love
closely
it.
related.
Yes,
But I wanted to
amen.
present how I work around ZFS API limitations available, because in a channel program, I can create a snapshot. I can roll back a file system as long as it is not mounted. I cannot create a file system. I cannot create a clone.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Fascinating and a fantastic hybrid of jail and ZFS.
And yeah.
I like that. And have you seen anything like that in Dockerland? Or are they always going with a prepackaged
they have the idea
image?
The thing is, your image could be a replication stream you keep, and you would receive it. That would also work. So, or it could be a tarball you unpack into a fresh data set and sync. And then sync and then snapshot.
Mm-hmm. And then
this is about avoiding moving and copying data as much as possible, so that because data has inertia if you have enough of it.
Right.
So I want to avoid moving that inertia, and ZFS has the tools to avoid that.
So presumably with package-based jails, and you're again working off a prototype one that gets cloned, or each one runs through package-based to
that's up to you
for
to decide.
each instance, and that's okay. Very cool.
So thin provisioning with basically one base system, maybe one base system configuration, so that I would have one with a full base system, one with a stripped down one. That's totally possible.
Okay.
It doesn't. This automation does not care. It would work with both, but the idea is definitely that you create one full one, don't run anything in it, except maybe minimal initial configuration, like for example, making it so that no processes remain in the jail. So basically on FreeBSD base, it would be disabling cron and syslogd, so that no processes remain after the RC script has finished, so that you make the jail persistent. It is there for dependency tracking purposes, but there is no processes in it, so it has minimal overhead. And that would then be the one which only provisions itself and then snapshots itself. And afterward, the snapshots are available for the dependent jails to use it as a origin for cloning from.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you start a dependent jail, it would pull in its dependency, that would provision itself, creating the initial one and only fig jail for that patch level. And then you can clone as many jails as you want of that, basically for free in a few tenths of milliseconds at most,
Okay, and
if you
then
have to change it.
your nifty stacking would allow you to update the underlying OS to a new
Yes,
origin
and because
jail.
I flattened that tree array and there is
Yep.
and erased basically the parent-child relationship between different mount points within the jail at the ZFS dataset level,
Yeah.
I don't have to untangle the tree structure and carefully do tree surgery to reassemble them into the right parent-child relationship. At this point, I just admit that I can run ZFS list to find all the data sets, sort them by mount point, and list the dataset name with ZFS list dash S mount point, and then point it at the right dataset. Make sure to basically maybe I print the can mount as well, and then I find all not unmountable file systems under that and mount them in order of mount point so that they get mounted correctly.
Fascinating. So
That
how far along are you
shell
on this
script
journey?
exists. That shell script exists by having redone the ZFS creation. I now have to rewrite the safety features in my package base shell script,
Mm-hmm.
which does the fixed J provisioning, because previously I used basically a dot as a prefix to the dataset name to indicate that it is a temporary dataset, which is only created to be installed into, and
Mm-hmm.
then it gets packaged installed into and afterwards snapshotted. And if I find a conflicting temporary one, I would just destroy that, pick a new UUID, create a new one, so that I clean up if it gets it crashed or something during the creation and has a partially installed jail. Yeah, sorry, you have to start the partially installed jail from scratch, because the way the package manager works, you can't use change root or jail at the kernel level on the package manager until within your change root or jail environment, there's enough FreeBSD to run the package manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
That may be an argument for using the static binary and then having it jail itself. That could work, but the other, in my opinion, better workaround is to just make sure that you only go from an empty jail to one which is installed from a trusted base repository. And otherwise, you would create a trusted jail and then use it configured to run with read-only file systems, except for the one where you're installing the untrusted jail into. So where the installing process is already untrusted, so that you would put basically use a subjail for that without networking and hard and
Yep.
tight resource limits and
Yep.
time limits. Maybe
Okay.
you could even set IO shaping and so on if you worry about someone
Goodness.
just wasting all your resources. But yeah,
So what's left
and
in this
then
science project? We've all watched all these parts
automating
fall into
the clone
place.
updating
Okay.
to work with the new scheme,
Yep.
and writing a couple of example configurations for
Okay.
not completely trivial to deploy stuff. So that, yeah.
Fascinating. And I do see how the lessons you've learned could apply to perhaps zones and Docker containers.
You could
And you're leveraging the heck out of
apply the same
ZFS as one
ideas
should.
to containers on Linux.
Yep.
I don't know enough about Solaris zones and if there are any obstacles there, but if there are no artificial limitations, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to do the same scheme of fig jails with mount point helpers, and then so within SMF and SVC, you should easily be able to express that if you run arbitrary helper commands to bring it up. It would work the same on any ZFS operating system with a style of operating system level virtualization. Doesn't matter if it's jails, zones, or containers, or whatever you call it.
Got it. Well,
the idea works.
Fascinating.
Any feedback how insane that is, and that you will, I don't know, tear your eyes out looking at the ZFS list output or something?
Like I said, I
tried to
cannot
use the GUID, but then I noticed that the GUID is only guaranteed to be unique for the duration it exists in the source pool. So in theory, just when I destroy the dataset named after its own, renamed after its own GUID, and then I create a new one, it could get the same GUID, because in the source pool right now the GUID is unused, so I can't use it.
Well,
as far as I know, if I allowed it to
so is that
consider.
GUID only unique to a given pool? I want to
Yes,
know
and
that
only
scope.
for its lifetime. So GUIDs can be reused.
They're not really GUIDs.
Yes, they are basically
PUIDs.
64-bit IDs, kind of handles more than globally unique IDs.
That's very good to know, because that behavior was never super clear to,
So
well, some
you
of
will
us.
on a pool, all GUIDs are unique at any single point in time, as far as I have understood it. So ZFS will, unless you introduce pool corruption and so on, not have, sure, if you break your pool and then fix up the checksums and then mount it,
Sure.
you could probably completely corrupt your pool by intentionally doing that. But
I would be curious how it handles a conflict. That's fascinating.
I don't want to see it happen.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I don't know what would happen. But according to the documentation and a few comments in the source code, I found it's a 64-bit number, and it will never assign it within the same pool multiple GUIDs, and the GUID is also, at least normally, preserved by sending and receiving. So it is stored. It would be interesting to see what happens when you exactly when you try to receive some kind of GUID collision intentionally into a target pool with replication.
Oh, well, that's a risk you might have at any given time, or does it renumber them?
Yeah, I don't know how it handles that. What exactly happens to be tested.
Right, yeah, no kidding. Well, I'm sure people would hit that all the time, so it must be saying, hey, there's a destination
64-bit
one.
is large enough that if you have a fairly random distribution, you wouldn't hit that all the time. No.
Okay.
With 32 bits, you would hit it all the time, but not with 64-bit. You would hit it. Someone would hit it eventually. It's more like the probability if I guesstimate that correctly.
Okay.
Yeah. So
to answer your question, on some level, I cannot stand the UUID dataset name. However, I completely understand why it's that way, and that's also how, say, for example, FreeNAS has always been using disk UUIDs, just because it keeps them hopefully unique. Go ahead.
Yeah, the problem with disk UUIDs is, especially in virtualized environments, there are neither unique nor really identify a disk. You can easily have a hypervisor do stupid things, and if you replicate your networked storage between, I don't know, different hosts, it may move them, and then now you have two disks with the same, or depending on how your physical hardware behaves, you may see the same disk on a different paths as different disks with the same ID, and that may actually be intentional, so that you can later have something in the kernel, like in FreeBSD G multipath, identify devices by disk ID and then generate a stateless GM multipath provider for it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the other alternative would be to have a external source of truth, some kind of distributed replicated database, which needs at least 3 hosts to get a quorum. So, and then you could use a strongly monotonic counter, which you may skip over counter values if something goes wrong, but you must not reuse counter values. But now you have a counter which only starts out small. It will eventually get long enough to be annoying, not as
Mm-hmm.
long as a UUID, but not that short that it is useful. And again, you must not reuse those counter values. That's the whole thing with the. I considered using just a file containing a counter value and then atomically updating that, but
The
um,
blockchain. Oh, sorry.
yeah, kind of. I know that you want to be funny, but yes, that would work. But something more like
I'm just being
useful
me,
with
dude.
more expressive like etcd or console or something along those lines would work. Redis has also recently gained support for event streaming so that you could have it there. But now you need at least 3 hosts, of which 2 have to be up. And if you want more than n-1 redundancy, because that blocks everything, now you need 5 hosts just for your database, so that 3 of them can form the quorum. Which, yeah, at that point I said, okay, all of that complexity just so that the name is a little bit less annoying. And especially a counter is so tempting. But I've always had my jail 13B, this and this. So I
Sure.
recreated it. Yeah.
Um,
No. You just undid most of the advantages, and now you've broken your backups.
okay, so I'll argue one of our greatest calls was about timekeeping, and I think the topic of, I'll call it aggressive global uniqueness, is a fascinating topic insofar as you do not want conflicts of those ZUIDs within a pool, the GUIDs within a system, or the world, the UUIDs within storage, the MAC addresses, you name it. So I'd be curious where else people have seen collisions of such unique things, air quotes, because it turns out they're perhaps not unique. That may not have to happen now, but you've certainly heard
Yeah, if
of
you had
all
an old
this nifty,
free-com
deep
network card
complexity.
in the days.
You've hit the tip of the iceberg here. What was that example? 3 days of what entropy, etc.
Hmm? No,
Uh,
I mean, man, if you had an old cloned free-com network chip,
oh yeah.
uh, they were like manufacturers who just ordered a whole bucket of cloned chips and had all of them run of a few hundred MAC addresses
Hmm.
and just reused them. And if people ended up with, I think Realtek had either intentionally or someone really went even lower and cloned a Realtek chip, and then you ended up with cheap office PCs or
Yep.
something with crappy network chips, which had real-world MAC address collisions. And
Yep.
yeah, more realistic these days is to have MAC address collisions in virtualized environments because it's quite common to pick at least 24-bit long prefix, which is fixed for the product,
Hmm.
and then you fill the last few bits, often more or less with randomness or with a truncated hash. And the birthday paradox is quite real if you have just 24 bits of entropy to work with. So after a few thousand hosts, you will see your first real-world MAC address collision in your
How many bits do you have to
virtual
work with?
network. Hmm?
What? How many bits do you have to work with?
Well,
Because
the
the
MAC
prefix
address
is
itself is
24.
48, but normally half of that is given to the product prefix or vendor
Right. So
prefix.
the second 24. Okay.
And then the lower 24 bits are filled with just something, often some kind of truncated hash value.
Yep.
Uh, but That means that if you have different things with all the hash inputs the same, you will always have a MAC address collision.
Yeah.
And if you have a random one by two different inputs, that's also quite likely to happen after a few hundred or a few thousand hosts,
Yep.
depending on what the definition for likely is. But you can easily plot the probability distribution and see it explode after
Okay.
half of the 12 bits.
So just an open question. What other conflicts have people seen in corners of a system hiding deep in there?
Well, the
Uh,
funny ones are things like that well virtualized virtual machines that you have basically a reproducible entry pool during provisioning, so that you end
yep.
up with essentially identical SSH private keys
Yeah,
between
okay.
virtual machines because you don't add enough entropy. You may even replicate from your golden master some kind of uh, random generator seed file, but if that is part of your golden image, yeah,
Yep.
you're reseeding all of your instances you create of that golden image with
Sounds like
the
that
same
Debian bug
seed.
years ago. Yep.
Hmm?
Nope.
Yeah, it has
Recall the
happened to
Debian bug?
multiple operating systems over time. And I'm sure to even more people building their deployments
Hmm.
to start something the first time, tidy up most of it, and
Sure.
then snapshot it and use it as a VM image to just create instances from.
Okay.
Yeah,
Andrew, Steve, young, others, where have you seen collisions that you did not expect and you were kind of promised uniqueness but didn't quite get it?
I haven't noticed any.
Okay. Uh, social security numbers. Okay. Well, anything else
ISBN
at that time
numbers,
you
barcode numbers.
sure? Oh, naturally.
People have just squatted barcode numbers uh, for their product, and suddenly you have two products which just squat common barcodes.
Hmm.
And yeah, now you're good luck inventorying them into a single system.
Not quite a Unix problem, except for the inventorying part, but okay. Um,
I mean, I have
well,
seen the MAC address recycling for that matter, but I haven't noticed it causing an issue in any of this stuff.
okay.
I mean,
Well,
the 3Com, I haven't used a 3Com card in ages.
where are they
Those were
now?
100 megabit low-end cards. I just had to laugh when I found two cards in the university network with the same MAC address. I was confused whether I actually found a real-world MAC address collision in real hardware. And yeah, it was old crap uh, in the spare parts bucket
Hmm.
for students, basically, to build a lab system.
Cool. Well, anything else at this time? That was
The
fascinating.
question I
Yes,
have
sir.
for which I don't have a good solution yet, or the least bad one maybe, is how would you tie those different UUID named datasets at inside the backups together into a single logical history
Hmm.
so that you can follow, for example, a jail whose names backups in time, even if the data sets are not technically in the same history because you created a new data set, you filled it with stuff by cloning and then changing it maybe. But from the user's point of view, the user does not think like that. They think this thing has a host name. I want to track the host name's history, not the feral data set's history. And how you would make it visible of the command line as one history.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not something I
Hmm. I'm sure you'll
have
come
looked
up with
deeply into,
something.
but that's something which naturally follows out of that because otherwise it becomes really annoying to, let's say you used this idea as I sketched out to upgrade a system and then you decide, oh no, I want to go back. That was a bad idea. There's a really nasty regression in the new system. I have to go back and now, oh yeah, but where to? I know it's somewhere. One of these UUIDs is the right one.
Yep,
Uh,
yep, yep. Stu, do you
how
have
do
anything?
you
Has your
turn
call
that
freed up?
into a
What Jan just described is the essence of what media asset managers, MAMs, are trying
yep,
to solve at a media level.
exactly. Often you have in more modern products now basically a content addressed object store as a backend for the blobs, but you have to version them, potentially tag them across renames,
Sure.
across import and export. So you have some kind of this is an asset, and now I
Oh,
import it into a project and stuff like this. And yeah, I
who's
would
seen
load
checksum
open it's
collisions? Because that sounds like a media strategy that might burn you.
on short
Yes.
enough checksums, sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
MD5 sum I have actually witnessed
For file
but only
name
with
or file
intentionally
content
malicious
or something
inputs.
else?
for file content. I have
Okay,
witnessed.
cool.
It's rare, but I have
Yeah,
seen it
but
happen.
it can happen.
Well,
Yeah, and
it's only
because MD5
semi-rare
has been
because
broken,
MD5 has been, yeah, MD5 has
Right.
been broken,
Right.
and so it's not considered useful for properly verifying against attacks anymore.
Sure, sure, sure.
yeah,
Absolutely. But in
and
prior to it being air quote broken, because it's always been broken.
Right.
I had seen it before.
Cool.
MD5 has always been just a 128-bit hash function. So
Mm,
yeah, that's about the lowest you can go and still have a useful cryptographic function for longer term
yep.
things.
Hence
But
broken.
the other annoying part is that MD5 isn't that fast on modern CPUs compared to the better alternatives. But it
Mm,
still gets MD5 is fast. No, only compared to SHA-1.
mm.
And that's because SHA-1 is terrible for modern CPUs. And MD5 is just a bit faster, but a lot weaker. And even SHA-1 is at the really, it is technically broken
Okay.
level. Don't use it.
Okay.
Then there's
Anything else at this
SHA-256.
time?
You can use that, but
Mm,
it is also inefficient on 64-bit CPUs. Then you get a truncated SHA-512, which,
save it for the checksum call.
yeah, and then you notice that there are just better alternatives like
Yeah.
Blake or something.
Yep, 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 yep. Okay. Anything else at this time?
Sorry for that
Stu,
rambling.
those videos are
I'm
up. Enjoy. Go ahead, Stu.
I'm officially changing my middle name to ambiguous.
Awesome. Okay, well, who wants the honors? Flip a coin. Well, I'll
Like
say it
and
for once. Oh,
subscribe.
you beat me to it. Nicely done. Okay, well, have a great remainder of the week, everyone. Take care.